You know, life has a way of circling back. What was once unimaginable can become undeniable. And what was once a whisper across borders becomes a declaration heard around the world. Something is shifting, something is cracking through the old walls that once defined who had the power, who got the upper hand, who set the rules, and who simply followed them. That old game where Western powers, especially America, sat at the top of the table while everyone else begged for a seat. Well, my friends, that game is changing. And right now, one of the boldest moves we've seen in decades has unfolded with breathtaking clarity. India, yes, India, the world's largest democracy, the ancient civilization, the land that has given us philosophy, mathematics, yoga, turmeric lattes, Bollywood dreams, and now a geopolitical earthquake. India has decided to end significant trade ties with the United States of America. And in a turn of global events that has left Washington stunned, India is pivoting deliberately, unapologetically toward Russia and China. Now, I know that might sound like just another headline to some folks, something to scroll past during your lunch break or catch a glimpse of on cable news. But let me tell you, this isn't just about imports and exports. This isn't about steel tariffs or data centers or semiconductor chips. This is about pride. This is about sovereignty. This is about a nation 1.4 billion people strong saying, we are not yours to manipulate anymore. We have to ask ourselves, what led to this moment? What made India, a longtime strategic partner, finally say enough? Because when you dig beneath the surface, you find a story of repeated disrespect, broken promises, unequal expectations, and a deeply felt frustration that has been simmering for years. India didn't just wake up one morning and decide to sever trade with the US. No. This was a long time coming. Every time America looked at India not as a partner, but as a pawn in its chess game against China, every time Washington made deals only to pull back when the political winds changed, every time American corporations benefited from Indian labor but gave little in return in terms of dignity or fairness, that resentment grew. And let's not forget the tariffs. Oh, the tariffs, one-sided, heavy-handed, often slapped on without warning. It was America's way of saying, do what we say or pay the price. But India is no longer in the business of bending its knees. Those days are over. And you know, when a country like India finally says we're done, that's not a tantrum. That's a revolution. That's a statement to the world that no one gets to define India's destiny but India itself. And I think we can all relate to that on some level. Haven't we all had a moment in our lives where we realized we were being used, where the relationship we were in wasn't mutual but transactional, where we had to walk away not because we wanted to cause chaos, but because we finally realized our worth? That's what India just did on the world stage. They looked at the global order, they looked at the constant pressure from Washington to pick sides in the US-China rivalry, and they said, we choose ourselves. And let me tell you something powerful. When a nation chooses itself, when it breaks away from the grip of expectation, that is a holy moment. That is a sacred act of reclamation. And right now, in front of our eyes, India is reclaiming its global narrative. This pivot to Russia and China is not just economic. It's symbolic. It's philosophical. It's spiritual in some sense. Because for too long, India has been told who its friends should be. For too long, it's been expected to fall in line with Western interests, even when they conflicted with its own. But let's not forget, this is a country that once stood toe-to-toe with colonial empires. A nation whose freedom struggle gave birth to Mahatma Gandhi's message of nonviolent resistance. That same country is now saying, we will align with whomever respects us, not whoever pressures us. Now, some in Washington are calling this betrayal. Some say India is playing with fire by turning toward Russia while the West tries to isolate Moscow. But what they fail to understand is that India doesn't play the same game anymore. The Cold War dynamics that defined so much of the 20th century are relics. India is not looking east to spite the West. It's looking east because that's where the future is. Look around. China may be a rival, but it's also a neighbor, a trade juggernaut, an undeniable force. Russia, despite sanctions and global condemnation, remains a key energy partner and a military supplier. India is playing a longer, deeper, wiser game, one that isn't bound by loyalty to outdated alliances, but by the pursuit of what's best for its people. We've seen it in the way India handled its oil imports, buying from Russia at discounted rates while the West cried foul. We've seen it in the way it's championing BRICS, building a new economic order beyond the dollar. And now this trade divorce with America, it's not petty, it's not impulsive, it's visionary. And I know there are people watching who will say, but Oprah, what about democracy? What about shared values? Isn't America the beacon of freedom? And to that I say, freedom also means the freedom to choose your own path. It means not being forced to conform to someone else's version of freedom. India isn't abandoning democracy, it's demanding equality within it. And let's talk for a moment about the hypocrisy. Because how many times has America made deals with authoritarian regimes when it suited their interests? How many times has the US turned a blind eye to injustice when oil or arms were involved? And yet, when India dares to engage with China or Russia to secure its future, suddenly it's a problem. Let me be clear. India is not anti-American, it's anti-manipulation. It is pro-dignity, and it is done being lectured. There's a humility in this decision, too. India isn't celebrating this as a victory over the West. It's not waving flags in triumph. It's simply walking into a new room with a new voice and a new kind of power. Because the world is multipolar now. And in that new world, no one power gets to decide the fate of all. This realignment toward Russia and China isn't just a shift. It's a signal. It's India saying we will not be isolated, sanctioned, or strong-armed. We will be respected. And maybe this is a wake-up call for America too. Maybe this is the moment when Washington has to look inward and ask, why are our partners walking away? Why are the alliances crumbling? Why do we keep losing the trust of the very nations we once called allies? Because if your friends keep leaving the room, maybe it's not them, maybe it's you. India's trade exit is not about revenge. It's about rebirth. It's about choosing not to be a subordinate anymore. It's about rewriting the terms of engagement so that every handshake is equal. And I know some folks will say this is risky, that India might suffer, that the Chinese dragon can't be trusted, that the Russian bear will bite. And maybe there's some truth to those fears. But let me ask you this, when has growth ever come without risk? When has courage ever shown up in comfort zones? India isn't just risking something, it's claiming something. It's claiming a future where it can stand with giants without shrinking. A future where trade isn't tied to obedience. A future where dignity is worth more than dollars. So here we are, at the edge of a new era where old empires fall and new leaders rise, not with bombs and bullying, but with conviction and clarity. India is rising, not as a shadow of the West, but as a light of its own. And that, my friends, is not a loss for America. That is an invitation to stop dominating and start collaborating. An invitation to meet India as an equal, not as a project. An invitation to recognize that respect can't be demanded. It must be earned. The world is watching, and history is listening. Will America continue to cling to the old world? or will it rise to meet the new one? India has made its choice. And in doing so, it has reminded every one of us what it means to stand in your truth. Not with anger, not with arrogance, but with power, real power. And so, as I stood there watching the world react to India's decision, I couldn't help but reflect on how often history repeats itself when the ones who've been told to sit quietly in the back of the room finally stand up. And when they stand, oh honey, the whole building shakes. India's trade break with the United States isn't just about economics, it's about emotional truth. It's about the centuries of being underestimated, the years of being treated like the junior partner, the whispers in diplomatic hallways that said, we like India when she listens, but we don't like it when she leads. Well, India is leading now. I want you to imagine what it feels like for a nation with the history of colonization, of being ruled, of having its resources extracted and its voice diminished, to finally walk into the light and say, we are no longer playing small. Can you feel that? Can you feel the weight of that history being shed like an old skin? This decision isn't just a political pivot, it's generational healing. It's ancestral pride. It's centuries of voices rising through the dust of forgotten villages and sacred rivers and saying, we matter. We always did. You just didn't want to see it. And if you look closely, you'll see that this isn't just happening in India. It's happening across the global south. It's happening in Africa, where nations are rethinking their loyalty to old colonial powers. It's happening in Latin America, where voices long ignored are now rewriting their stories. World is waking up. The world is breaking the spell. And maybe that scares some people, because the balance of power is shifting. It's not just military or financial, it's cultural, emotional, and spiritual. America has long held the microphone, but now the stage is being shared. And India, with her billion dreams, her ancient soul, and her modern brilliance, is ready to speak. Not in English only, but in Hindi, in Tamil, in Bengali, in Marathi, in Punjabi, in the thousands of dialects that pulse through her streets and her temples and her technology hubs. This is not about rejecting the West. It's about refusing to be defined by it. You see, for too long, global partnerships have been cloaked in inequality. Free trade that wasn't really free, agreements that were called fair but tilted the scales, deals that gave access to markets while demanding silence in return. But India's silence has ended. And let's talk about the cost of courage. Because this decision doesn't come without consequences. There will be backlash, there will be attempts to isolate, there will be economic friction. Washington will try to pressure allies to punish India economically. Some headlines will paint India as betraying the liberal order. But let's be honest, how liberal is that order if it only works when you obey? Real friendship doesn't punish independence, it celebrates it. And for the everyday Indian, the farmer in Punjab, the coder in Bengaluru, the grandmother making chai in a Delhi apartment, this shift isn't just geopolitical, it's personal. It's the government saying, we will no longer trade your dignity for a seat at someone else's table. We will build our own table. And on that table will be Russian oil, Chinese railways, Indian wheat, African minerals, South American soybeans, because the new world is being built by the formerly ignored. But let me say something to the American people, to the folks watching this unfold and wondering what it means for them. This is not about hating America, it's about growing beyond it. It's about the idea that no one nation should hold the dreams of others hostage. And America, if it listens deeply, if it humbles itself, could emerge stronger from this. Because when your old friends find their voice, it doesn't mean the friendship is over. It means it has a chance to evolve. Maybe this is the moment when America stops expecting loyalty and starts earning trust again. Maybe this is the moment when policymakers realize that influence is no longer measured by fear, but by mutual respect. Maybe it's time for a new diplomacy, not built on sanctions and suspicion, but on shared vision and values that honor every country's unique journey. Because India isn't asking for favors. India is asking for fairness. And as the world changes, so must our expectations. This move also tells us something deeper about the future of identity. No longer are nations content to play roles written by someone else. They want to write their own scripts. They want to cast their own stars. They want to direct their own future. And I don't know about you, but I believe in that kind of power. I believe in the power of self-determination. I believe in the power of nations and people to rise from underestimation and say, we are not what you thought we were. I remember the times when America courted India when it needed a counterweight to China, when it praised India's democracy, its economy, its diversity. But love isn't real if it only shows up when it's convenient. India saw the double standards, the constant finger pointing on human rights while ignoring abuses elsewhere. The lectures on military purchases from Russia while Europe bought Russian gas, the conditionality of aid, the condescension in tone, the discomfort with India's ambition. So India made a choice, not because it wants war, not because it seeks chaos, but because it wants peace on its own terms. And for a nation that has given the world nonviolence to now turn its back on trade relationships that come with strings, well, maybe we should listen more closely, because maybe it's not an act of rebellion. Maybe it's an act of rebirth. So let us not meet this moment with fear. Let us meet it with faith. Faith that a world where power is shared is a world where peace is possible. Faith that breaking from old partnerships doesn't mean breaking from shared humanity. We are entering a new era where East meets East before it looks West, where the global South becomes the global center, where cooperation is no longer transactional but transformational. And India is showing the way. To the students watching this, you are the architects of this new world. To the business leaders watching, your models must evolve. To the politicians watching, humility is no longer optional, it's essential. And to every citizen, no matter where you live, I say this: when you see a nation rise, don't just ask what it means for your economy. Ask what it means for your empathy. Ask how you can be a bridge, not a barrier. Because the world is not falling apart. It's falling into place. And if we have the courage to listen to each other, to history, to truth, we might just build something better. India is not leaving the conversation. India is changing the language. And it's time we all learned how to speak in a way that honors everyone's voice. Not just the loudest, not just the richest, but the realest. India is rising, and we are all witnesses.